So let the waves of revival come wash over me as I kneel.
Touch on it again. So they leave, and we're in verse 5, but I just want to try and tell the story to make it a bit shorter. They leave, and the Egyptian says, what have we done to let them go? Who's going to work for us now if we've let them go? In verse 7, they say, he took 600 of the best chariots, along with all the other chariots of Egypt, with officers over all of them. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, so that he pursued the Israelites who were marching out boldly. So the Israelites thought, now, okay, God has set us free from the trouble that we were in. We're now out of Egypt. We're now strong and bold, and they're marching away. But they are a whole group of men, women, and children, possibly pregnant ladies. So they are a whole big group of people walking. And they are being pursued by the best of Egypt's chariots. Who do you think is going to win? Who has ever felt like you're being pursued by 600 chariots? That something is chasing after you, and you have to try and take pregnant ladies and children and everybody with you to get out of trouble, but the trouble is coming much faster than what you can move away. Okay, so they were in crisis. Verse 10, and as Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified. But just 2 verses ago, they said they were bold. Now suddenly they are terrified. Okay? They've shifted from being so strong in God to being terrified. And they said to Moses, was it because there was no graves in Egypt that you brought us out to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. There's no greater indictment against a leader than when somebody says it would have been better if you left us alone. A leader that's done, Moses had been to Pharaoh 10 times. He had ministered and tried to encourage them. He has told them to put the blood on the doorpost. They've seen miracle after miracle. And the first sign of trouble comes, and they turn on Moses and say, what have you done? Why did you bring us out of here? And I want to say that every process of freedom that there is in your life, there's a day of why. There's a day that it would have been better if we never did. It would have been easier if we didn't try this. As a pastor, you sometimes say it would have been easier if you didn't start the church. It would have been easier if I didn't plant the home cell. It would have been easier if I never joined the praise and worship team. As a businessman, you cry out, maybe I shouldn't have done this. Maybe I should have stayed at a job. Maybe I shouldn't have stepped out. As getting married, maybe I shouldn't have done this. It would have been better if I never met you. Okay, there's nobody who thinks that that's funny. Okay. I thought I'm talking from you. But they turned from being bold to being terrified. And when you're terrified, your mouth runs and you say stuff without thinking about it. They said, we told you to leave us alone. But Moses answered them in verse 13, do not be afraid. That's the most common instruction in the Bible. Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance of the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today will never see again. You will never see them again. If you can get past the days of why and what did you do and it would have been better, then there's a deliverance that is complete freedom. There's a deliverance that says, I'm never going to have to deal with this issue again. And that's the true freedom. You see, they were out of Egypt, so if it's a picture of our life, because this is one of the most prophetic stories in the Bible, so they came out of Egypt, so they were free, and that's why they were bold. What were you addicted of that you now boldly says, I'm not addicted to it anymore? But then those chariots chase you, and they chase you down. And you got, yes, I should never have tried to even stop. I should never have even tried to be free. And he says in verse 14, the Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. When you can hear that message, because when we are terrified, we run around like mad people trying to figure out, what can I do? What must I change? Where can I? How can I? But he says, just be still. Just be still. Don't try and solve it. Have faith. Then the Lord says to Moses, why are you crying out to me? That's one of the verses I want to take out of the Bible. Imagine you going to God in a desperate way. God, please help me. God, I believe you can save me. God, help. Why are you crying out to me? That's not the answer I want from my God. That's not the answer I'm expecting. But God says he has already given the answer. Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on, and you raise your staff and stretch it out, your hand over the sea to divide the water, so the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. You see, there's an instruction always in the midst of the crisis. Some of us are wanting to pray and pray and pray and cry out and cry out. But God says, don't cry out. I've given you an instruction. Move on, and you lift up your staff over the water, and I'm going to do it. So what you have to look for in the midst of the crisis is, what is God saying I must do? It might be some insignificant thing. But if Moses never lifted his staff, what would have happened? If Moses just kept on crying out to God instead of doing what God has said he must do, what would happen? And we've got to listen for the instruction. Most of us, when we are terrified and in crisis, we can't think straight and we can't hear straight. All we want to do is cry out. And then in verse 18, the Lord says, the Egyptians will know that I am Lord. The Lord, when I gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. The angel of the Lord, who had been traveling in front of Israel's army, withdrew and went behind him. Okay, I need some Egyptians and some Israelites quickly. I need some Egyptians here, please. Who's going to volunteer to be chasing them down? And I need some Israelites that side. Okay, you all want to be pursuers. I need some people being pursued. All right. Okay. So we assume now, we can't see it, but they're catching up. They're getting closer and closer, and it's becoming evening. Okay? Stop there. Stop. We are imagining, go back to there. We are imagining that all of us are moving, but we have run out of space. Then the Bible says, the angel of the Lord, who had been traveling in front of you guys, so you're going that way, face that way, there was an angel in front of you. And God says, the angel came to behind them. You, my angel, come stand here. For now, just stand here. Not you, Craig. I need a bigger angel. Okay, so Craig is now the angel, and the angel has come to be behind them. Coming between, Then the angel of the Lord, who had been traveling in front of Israel's army, withdrew and went behind him. And the pillar of cloud also moved from in front and stood behind them. coming between the armies of Egypt and Israel. Throughout the night, the cloud brought darkness to the one side and light to the other side. Some of you are facing such difficulty that it feels like a night, that you just have to get through this night. You just have to get through this little one period. And God comes and steps in between whatever you're facing and says, you can now not see them. You cannot get to them because to you it's darkness and to them it's light. So neither went near each other for the whole night long. Okay? You can go sit. But can you imagine that even before God brings the deliverance, He put something in between they can't touch you. He put something there that cannot, the works of Satan, the ones who are pursuing you, the negative things cannot touch you. That in the midst of crisis, there is someone between you and that which is pursuing you. God stretches out and He puts I cannot create a cloud here, but He puts such a thick fog here between you and your pursuers that they can't even see you. Then Moses in verse 21 stretched out his hand over the sea. And all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. You see, there's a process of the freedom. So while the process was happening, while the wind was blowing, God stopped the pursuers. He said, you cannot get to them while I'm making a way. While I'm letting the east wind blow, there is no way you can get to him. And I believe there's an east wind blowing in some of your lives. God is busy creating a way out. You're looking at the moment and you're just seeing sea, but there's a wind blowing. And God has stopped the process and said, nobody's getting to them until I'm finished preparing a way. And the east wind blew and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry land, with a wall of water on their right and on their left. Men, that means we don't even have to put our shorts on to get through. Ladies, you don't even have to pull up your skirts because it's dry land. It's not muddy and a little bit of water. All the children's Bibles had like a little bit of muddiness and water there as they walked through. But God created it dry land. God created for you to walk through, that you don't even get a little bit wet. You'll walk through the sea of despondency, the sea of hopelessness, the sea of financial trouble that we have already dealt with, the sea of relational pain. Whatever you're going through, God says you're going to walk through it on dry land. It's not even going to leave you muddy and dirty. It's going to have nothing on you. And then we know what happens. The Egyptians pursued them, verse 23, and all the Pharaoh's horses and chariots and horsemen followed them into the sea. And during the last watch, the night, the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and the cloud at the Egyptian army and threw it into confusion. Who messed up the army? God did. He threw it into confusion. And here's one of the other great scriptures. He jammed the wheels of their chariots so that they had difficulty driving. We all live in a natural world. Do we agree? Our God is a God of the supernatural, but we live in a natural world. We live in a place where wheels must be oiled to turn and where gravity will hurt us. This was a bit higher, and I just stepped off. I would fall down. One of the most wonderful things about the natural world is that God created laws that keeps the whole world in balance. One of them that I love is the fact that there is gravity on earth, but it's balanced by a centrifugal force and those two are in perfect balance. If the one was stronger than the other one, we'd go flying off, or we wouldn't be able to stand up. If gravity was too strong, we'd be just a blob on the floor. And if the centrifugal force was stronger than gravity, we would all be taking off and be launched into the sky. But God brings a perfect balance to the natural world that allows us to live here. Other one that I've often mentioned is God created water, the thing that gives life. And water has this one tendency that the heaviest always goes down. Is that true? Those of you that do science, the heaviest always goes down. But if that was the only law he put into place, the whole earth would have become no movement, no streams, nothing. But the moment the water gets down into the big depths, it freezes. And what happens immediately when it freezes? Comes back up to the top to sunlight to be defrosted again. And that process, that water freezes and that frozen water floats, is one of the things that makes the world a livable world. So God wrote practical, natural laws into the whole system. But then he goes and he steps outside of those natural laws when he does something supernatural and he starts jamming up somebody's wheels or he makes the sea open up. So God can step in and change the natural situation that you know and that you face and where you can't see any way out, because he is the author and finisher of the natural laws. The laws of physics are all under God's hand. He's the one who wrote them. He's the one who made them. He's the one who keeps them in place. But God loves you so much that sometimes he'll step outside of his laws of nature. That's why somebody could walk on the water. Okay? If God didn't change the laws of physics, he would have never walked on water. But God can change the laws of physics to save you. So he jammed the wheels of their chariots so that they had difficulty in driving. And the Egyptian says, let's get away from the Israelites. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt. I want you to know in your heart of hearts that God is fighting for you. It's you're not alone on your own. You know, whatever you're facing, it's not just you and natural laws. It is you and God, the one who controls the natural laws, that are fighting whatever you're fighting. Whatever you are being exposed to, whatever is draining you, whatever is taking everything away from you, all of that is subject to our King of Kings, subject to the Lord of Lords. In verse 27, Moses stretched out his hand over the sea at daybreak, and the sea went back into its place. And the water flowed back and covered the chariots and horsemen. The entire army of Pharaoh that had followed the Israelites into the sea, not one of them survived. So if the movie started with these families with livestock and children walking slowly, and these chariots are coming at speed towards them, dust going and shouting, and horses' mouths open wide, and spears and helmets, you would think the end is annihilation. And you'd be right. But it's not annihilation of the defenseless. It's not the annihilation of the helpless. It is annihilation of those that had everything. Because God was on the side of the helpless. Because God was on the side of his people. You see, we need to know that God is on our side. Jump to verse 31. And when the Israelites saw the mighty hand of the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in Moses, his servant. There's something that happens when God proves himself. Sometimes we go through these things for one reason only, that God wants to show himself mighty. God has already seen the end of your movie. God has already seen the end of your life. God has already seen the end of this chapter. Right now, you might not see God moving, but I can promise you He is busy moving. He's busy changing. He's busy setting you up for success. Doesn't matter what it looks like. Doesn't matter what you see in the natural. Take your eyes off the natural and look at Him. Look up at Him. Okay. So this morning we're not really teaching, we're just telling stories. Let's go to another story. In Daniel 3, from verse 13. We know that Daniel was there and King Nebuchadnezzar was there, and King made the rule that everybody had to bow down to the golden images. Everyone had to serve him and his gods. And there was Shadrach, Mishac and Abednego, and they didn't listen to him. Let's just jump straight to verse 14. Shadrach, Mishac, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If that is the case, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fire furnace. He's saying he's going to throw them in the furnace. Their response is not, oh no, don't let that happen. Their response is, it doesn't matter, you can do what you like, our God will bring us through. It doesn't matter if you're going to throw us into the fiery furnace or not, our God will take us through. That is faith. When you're not shouting out to be delivered from the fiery furnace, but you have the confidence that even if you land in the fiery furnace, you'll get through it. Even if it goes wrong. Even if nothing that you planned works. The problem is Christians are too scared and they don't trust God in the midst of crisis. They don't have the faith to know it doesn't matter what happens on the outside. My God's got me. If I die in this process, I get promoted to heaven. If this is really to death, it's okay because I'm going to heaven. And if it's not to death, I'm okay with that. So either way, I win. I asked Uncle Dave yesterday, he comes from Scotland, what does he do when Scotland plays against the Springboks? And with great confidence, he said to me, I can't lose on that day. Because it doesn't matter which team wins, I'm supporting that team. So I want Christians to have that type of attitude. I can't lose. Because if I lose, I get promoted. If it is really such a mess that I die, and most of us are not even facing death. We're just facing financial trouble, health issues, things in the natural, relationship, emotional. A lot of what we face is emotional. Isn't that true? It's just how we feel. It's not really what we're going through. It's how we feel. And in all of that, we can just get this one thing in our heart. It's okay, whatever happens. My God will get me through. He will deliver us from your hand, O King. But if not, let it be known to you, O King, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up. Even if God doesn't save me, I'm still going to serve him. Even if God allows it to go wrong, I've made up my mind, I'm serving him. That's what they are shouting out. You can't do anything to us because our God will deliver us. But if you win, it won't change who we worship. People want to say, well, if God does this for me, I'll worship him. If God does that, I'll worship him. Well, God didn't stop me from having a hard time financially. I don't want to serve him anymore. So many people think they can hold God accountable as if they are God and God is there for their bidding. You've got it wrong, my friend. God is in charge, and if he loves you or doesn't love you, he's still God. but I know he does love you. If he brings you through or he doesn't bring you through, he's still God. And you don't have the right to say, God, I'll serve you if you bless me. We don't have that right. Shadrach, Mishac, and Abednego said, even if he doesn't, I will still serve him. Verse 19, then Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury. If you're used to people being scared of you and jumping up and down when you give an instruction, and they say, you can do what you like, it's not going to affect us, he's going to be upset. So he's full of fury, and the expression on his face changed towards them. And he spoke and commanded that they heat the furnace 7 times more than it was usually heated. And he commanded certain mighty men of valor who were in his army to bind Shadrach, Mishac, and Abednego and cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their trousers, and their turbans and other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's command was urgent, and the furnace exceedingly hot, the flames of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound in the midst of the burning fiery furnace. They worshipped while they were being thrown into the fire. They didn't let all kinds of stuff come out of their mouth when there was a bit of pressure. I'm guilty of being like a tube. How do you look for where's a leak? Those of us that grew up installed bicycle tubes and car tubes. How do we look for a tube? We put it under pressure, we blow it up, then we put it under water and we hold it there and we look for wherever the bubbles come out. We know there's the leak. I think God does the same to us sometimes. He puts us under pressure and he holds us down for a while and he sees what comes out. Okay, there's an area, Hannes, that you need to fix in your life. There's an area where it's not yet fully under my control. And God's busy patching me up, and then he patches here, then I think they're all fixed now. Then there's another place where bubbles come out, and he puts a patch on there again. But the same way, these guys were thrown into the fire, and nothing came out except worship. Nothing came out except falling on their face. I've seen people go through crisis, and I say, let's worship. I can't worship God while I'm in crisis. I can't come to church. I'm too much of a mess. I can't turn to God because I've messed up so much. That's exactly the wrong thing to do. Even if you're going through the fiery furnace, even if it's hurting so much, now it's not anymore hurting only emotionally. Now there's flames. Now all of your arrogance, all of the things that you thought God's going to save you, all of your faith, all of that's lying in tatters and you're inside the fire. What's going to be your response? For then the king Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, and he rose in haste and spoke, saying to his counselors, did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? And they answered and said to the king, yes, king. Look, he answered, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. What is the song we sing? There's another man in the fire. Comes from this scripture. Whatever you're going through, you're not going through it alone. Whatever pain you're experiencing and disappointments, and even if it feels like a fiery furnace trial, you're never alone. There's another man in the fire with you. There's another man in the fire. Have you heard it? And they are walking in the midst of the fire. They were thrown in bound, and they're walking around freely. And they're not hurt. In the other trial, they said they walked through on dry land. Yeah, they are in the fire, but they're worshiping and they're walking around and they're not hurt. And he says, there's another man in the fire. And the form of the fourth is like the Son of God. The Son of God is with you in whatever you're facing, whatever you think is to death. Number one, you're not alone. Number two, it is not touching you. It is not hurting you. Then Nebuchadnezzar, verse 26, went near the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spoke, saying, Shadrach, Mishac, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here. Then they came out from the midst of the fire, and all the administrators and governors and king's counselors gathered together. And they saw these men whose bodies the fire had no power. The hair of their head was not singed, nor were their garments affected. And the smell of fire was not upon them. You're going to go through stuff. But God is so much with you that there will be no scars. There won't be even the smell of the pain you've gone through. People would say, but weren't you the one who had cancer? Weren't you the one who went bankrupt? Weren't you the one who came through a divorce? Weren't you the one whose child rejected you? Weren't you the one who lived in poverty all these years? But when God's finished, there's not even a smell of any of the things you've gone through on you. He doesn't only take you through. It has no power to leave a mark upon you. Christians, your past is your past. Don't let it become and leave a mark on you. Don't let it leave something on you that affects how you think for the rest of your life. Next time that you face the choice to bow down or go into the fire, are you going to make a different choice? Or are you going to say, you know what, God was so much with me. I don't care if it happens again, because he's with me in the fire and out of the fire. I come out of there in any case without the smell of it upon me. My hair is not even singed. As a young boy, I was in a fire for a couple of seconds when a gas bottle started a gas leak, started a huge flame. And all my hair was burnt off. My clothes burnt off my body, and I was just like one big blister on my arms. You could push it in here, then it pops out there, push it in there, and it pops in there. But God says, your hair won't even be singed. It just takes a little flame to actually singe our hair. Just a couple of seconds in a flame, and your hair's gone. God says, you're going to walk through the fiery furnace, and not even your hair will be singed. Verse 28, Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Mishac, and Abednego, who sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him. And they have frustrated the king's word and yielded their bodies, that they should not serve nor worship any God except their own God. You see, when your trial makes other people worship God, your reaction to your trial will have an effect on others. Nebuchadnezzar starts worshiping the God of Shadrach, Mishac, and Abednego because of how they went through the trial, of how he saw God with them. Therefore, I make a decree that any people, nation, or language which speaks anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Mishac, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made an ash heap, because there is no other God who can deliver like this. People must see God in your deliverance. If you're just half free, then they're not going to worship God. If you walk around and like I say, my clothes were burnt off my body and I was black in the face and no hair left, then people don't worship God. But when they see you've been through the trial, you've been through that place where most people would have folded, but you stood. You didn't change. Who you worshipped and how you worshipped doesn't change in the midst of a trial. That shocks people into believing in God. That's the challenge, people. So we serve a God who holds all the physical laws in his hand. Fire and flesh, what is the physical law? It burns. It destroys it. We all love a piece of meat on the braai, just a little bit tanned, but don't leave it there till it's black, then it's not nice anymore. But God says, the physical law of that fire is going to destroy you. I can take charge of. The physical law that you cannot walk through a sea on dry land, I can take charge of. The physical law of step out of a boat and walk on the water, I can take charge of. God says, some of you, I have to take charge of the physical laws to save you from the situation that you're in. But your mind has been so conditioned, thinking I can only save you within the physical realm, within the laws that I set up myself. God is saying today, I can step outside of those laws and I can save you. Because I, as God, am not limited by the laws I wrote. I'm not limited by the gravity or fire or water or any of those things. I am the God of those things as well. So I want you to let's stand, worship team, come and join us. Let us take note of our crisis. You might not be in a crisis today, praise God. But I can tell you that there are days that, did I take your mic? Sorry. There's yours there. There is days of crisis that comes in all of our lives. And how you respond to the crisis will depend on how you affect those around you. If you run around, oh no, God hates me, I can't do anything right, I'm just a mess, nobody's going to turn to God. But if you can stand up and say, it doesn't matter what happens to me, I'm on my way to heaven. The road there might be difficult, it might be easy, but I'm on my way to heaven and I know the destination I'm going to. And I've made up my mind, I'm going to serve him. Doesn't matter what the cost or the temptation or the issues that is in my life, I'm going to serve him. You'll see people turn to God all around you. All around.
You shine, want more of you. You shine.